welcome to Business Edge. I am Joanna Mustafa, and on the show today, with elections set for months end, we speak with the only woman running for presidency at the African Development Bank, Swazi Shabalala, and will Nigeria's electricity roadmap be the much-needed game changer? We'll also be speaking with Professor Yemi Oke and industry expert Ayo Ekpo. This and more on the show today, and we're going to begin with our first conversation, especially after Monday's incident. The federal government of Nigeria has approved the National Integrated Electricity Policy, a comprehensive roadmap to transform the country's power sector. The policy aims to enhance sector governance, drive investments, and promote renewable energy adoption. It addresses infrastructure deficits, regulatory bottlenecks, and encourages state electricity markets. And with the policy in place, Nigeria is expected to witness greater investor confidence, more efficient power delivery, and improved service delivery. The NIEP, as it is called, replaces the outdated 2001 policy, and according to the Minister of Power, implementation has already begun, and the policy is set to gain momentum. Professor Yemi Oke, Energy and Electricity Law, University of Lagos, and Ayo Ekpo, Team Lead at Power Component UK Nigeria Industry Advisory Facility, joins me now for the leading conversation. Good morning, sirs.
Morning, Joanna. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you in, Ayo, and Prof as well. Let's begin with you, Mr. Ayo. We know that there are key challenges facing Nigeria's power sector: the AT&C losses, weak grid infrastructure, which is why we have the frequent grid collapses, and investments. How does this National Integrated Electricity Policy address some of these issues?
Okay, so strength-wise, it's been 24 years since we had an electricity policy. The previous one, the 2001 policy, presumed that it would be reviewed regularly, no more than every 5 years. It took us 20 years to do a proper policy review. So the first thing, of course, is just that question of integration, coordination, and putting things in some kind of alignment that key stakeholders can buy into across the industry. Obviously, over the last 13, 15 years, there's been a lot more people that have come into the frame of involvement in the power sector. So in order to get people aligned, stakeholders aligned, players aligned, licensees, states, also another point which needs to be borne in mind, we need this policy. Now, you've got a situation where, for the first time since independence, we've recognized our federal structure, and the states, which is where we all live in Nigeria, have now been also involved in trying to bring about some sensible, orderly process of both creating policy, making laws, and also implementing those laws. So I would say that those two things very quickly are key benefits, major benefits that we have. One more thing I should mention is the fact that local content development, human capital development, which are vital to establishing a sustainable value chain in the industry, have also, for the first time, really been given a lot more recognition, a lot more importance in terms of determining sensible policy initiatives that are now capable of being implemented. So I will mention those 2-3 things very quickly.
All right. We'll come to some of the nitty-gritties, the details of this policy, but I'd also like to get your take, Prof. We know that, as has been stated, this replaces the National Electricity Power Policy of 2001. Aside from it being outdated, why was it important that it be replaced? What has changed? Did the sector flesh out the recommendations of that previous policy document, Prof?
That question for me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. The new policy has done something different compared to the previous one. If you, by virtue of Section 3 of the Electricity Act, we now have a situation in which the electricity policy is now mainstreamed as part of the law itself. So the National Integrated Electricity Policy is now part and parcel of the Electricity Act of 2023. That is a laudable initiative So it's no longer a matter of policy, especially speaking for me, it's now a matter of law, because that section provides detailed components as to what should be embodied in the NIEP, which has recently been approved by the National Executive Council. It also provides for detailed procedural issues to be followed. It must be approved by the National Executive Committee of Nigeria, review every 3-5 years, and the rest is detailed. But the challenge, as you know, for us, it's not just in the law or in the policy framework, even where those nice, fantastic policies are mainstreamed into the law. Who implements it?
And I'll come to you, Prof.
How do we benchmark? Okay.
Yeah, I'll come to you on that when it comes to the implementation and what needs to be done to ensure that smooth implementation. But real quick, getting to the details of the documents, I'm coming back to you, Ekpo. One thing that stood out is the removal of subsidy, which is rather controversial, especially for the consumer. We know that there's still some partial subsidy in there at the moment. So can you expand on that, especially as is contained in this National Integrated Policy document?
Subsidies are so one has to be, it's a whole subject by itself, you know, but subsidies are a consequence of something. Federal government's involvement in the sector itself financially is a consequence of inability up till this point in time to essentially ensure that electricity, which is actually a manufactured commodity, is delivered in a manner that accords with markets and the way markets work. Now, which is not to say that subsidies are not required. What we do need to do is to target our subsidies in the right way at those who actually deserve and need to have their consumption subsidized in some way or the other. It also drives us at the question, now, the policy now actually makes us ask ourselves, is the best way to provide a subsidy by actually paying people's bills or by reducing the cost of the connections that we need to ensure that we all have access? I think it answers that in the latter sense, right? In terms of bringing us more into looking at the kinds of markets that we have in the country. We don't have a single market in Nigeria. We have different kinds of markets. We have a wholesale market. We also have, importantly, for this thing about subsidies, an off-grid market, one in which we have people who are not served at all, who are grossly underserved and need to have and are best served by having their connections reduced. So what the policy has done is to make us, and if you recall, the Minister of Power himself, on Monday when he announced this happy event about the policy, also noted that it's time for us to actually take a look at the way we fund the sector. The government cannot continue to be an all providing financial player in the market by subsidizing those of us who can probably afford in some way to pay our bills, but also those who cannot and who actually need the subsidies. So but the question also makes us now ask ourselves, because really the issue around subsidies also implicates the fact of cost-reflective tariffs or the absence of cost-reflective tariffs and how they can be set. And it drives us also to look at the question around why is there such a resistance to people having to pay bills? And it is the fact that, I would say, the fact that we have to pay this cost-reflective tariff, but also contend with the inconsistency and the unavailability of supply from distribution companies. Now, that question can be interrogated, but the benefit that we do have is that the policy now also brings in those who are really important in looking at the distribution sector, which is the states themselves. Electricity, at the end of the day, is a business that involves the local player, the local resident, people at the lower level. And we all reside in states. So this question is one that we now have a platform for dealing with states involved in it, states having to look at the distribution side, but also the federal government also having to focus and concentrate on its own key responsibility, which is the wholesale side, the national grid, and making sure that the national grid can actually deliver energy into the states.
All right, Mr.
So, in short, I would address it in this way.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ayo. Coming back to you, Prof, and looking again at the details of this document, how would you say that this NIEP aligns with global best practices in the power sector, especially with reference to the power mix and renewables? And what lessons has Nigeria learned from other countries?
The document is also a reflection of global trends, no doubt. It is a reflection of what happens in other countries or countries. Nigeria cannot continue to be an isolated player when we talk of the power sector. It's a matter of global reality. So the world is very renewables, no doubt. And you have encapsulated in the policy. I don't know, I struggle to call it policy because that's what it is. But it's law now because it's profound to a legal provision. So it means it's binding on us. So what is contained in there is we have a situation in which it provides for extensive optimization of renewables. Talking of coal, natural gas, even nuclear, as well as rural electrification projects, solarization, and what have you. So it's comprehensive. You know, what it does is to identify a whole chunk of options, renewable and not options that are not technically renewable. We listed them. Coal is not renewable. It's not environmentally friendly, but it's an option if you're thinking of maximizing the megawatts. So it identifies coal, natural gas, nuclear substances, as well as renewable energy such as solar, hydrogen, and other components. So
there's a good mix.
There. And it particularises the fact that we also have to do bottom-up approach, which meaning from the rural communities, from the local level, in line with the decentralization regime that we have pursuant to the electricity have and the constitution.
Right.
So I mean, it clearly shows a path for us to grow our energy sufficiency and energy picture. But then the challenge for some of us in the sector is about getting the job done.
Right, as you have said, it is law and implementation is key. We'll see, and again, we'll come to that in just a bit. But I'm coming back to you, Mr. Ekpo. How do you see the NIEP impacting the operations and even strategies of existing power sector players in Nigeria? We know there's a structure already on ground. How will they be impacted by this policy? And what opportunities as well will the NIEP create for new entrants and startups within the power sector?
Okay, so one of the biggest benefits of the policy, and indeed the Electricity Act also, is the decentralization of the sector. We used to have one central electric power sector in the country, regulated out of Abuja, policy made out of Abuja. The Constitution was amended in 2023. The Act was also passed in 2023, and you now have a policy as required by the Act that has now kind of laid out a framework that we can all address. So you now see that the field has been decentralized and expanded. You have three kinds of markets in the country today. You have the national wholesale market, where you have the big generators, the big national grid, and these big players can connect with that. And through that connection, do business with state markets and players who are at state level. So within the states, you also have scope for much smaller players, but also the entirety of distribution. So if you want to distribute electricity within a state now and going forward, you contract with a big player that then delivers this energy to you through the grid. But also within the states, you will have the opportunity to have much smaller markets that address the real need of the country, which is to expand electricity access to our populations. As you know, we have today something like just about 90 million Nigerians totally unconnected, without access of any kind. And the policy directs very clearly that one of the key objectives of law going forward is just to make sure that that opportunity of bringing people into the frame of involvement in the power sector is expanded. So electricity access is a big issue. And that takes us to the third kind of market that we have, beyond state markets, which is the off-grid market that serves these largely underserved or totally unserved communities. The best way to access them, the least cost manner in which to access them, is to use the huge improvement that we now have in technology, being able to use off-grid technologies largely around renewables. We know that Nigeria is one in which we have huge sources of renewable energy, wind, solar, and of course, the many streams, the many bodies of water that crisscross our country, both in the north and in the south. And so you now have the opportunity, which is expanded for that particular market, which I think is probably the most exciting and the most interesting at the moment.
It will be
to go into being able to address that.
Right.
And the opportunities now, they're expanded. You already have players in that, but because we now have the policy saying this, and the federal government wants to make a conscious effort, along with the states, in addressing that market through the REA, and also with the fact that we now have Nigeria involved as a major player in the M300 Compact, Nigeria's own M300 Compact, which is part of the M300 program, the Mission 300 program of the World Bank and the AFDB, in which really for Africa, we can't really attain it unless Nigeria itself plays big in that. So you have the opportunity to bring policy and thinking around M300 and the implementation of the policy together to address particularly that need of bringing our 90 million or so Nigerians who really have not seen a light bulb or have not had access to electricity networks
let's hope
through the off-grid market.
Yeah, let's hope this policy document addresses all that. And again, the keys in implementation. So I'm coming finally to you, Professor Yemi. The Nigerian Integrated Electricity Policy, it's a blueprint, it's a plan. What is it going to take to flesh this out beyond just the paperwork, right? What will be key in driving and ensuring that we do not miss it when it comes to implementation?
Thank you. Generally, implementation is key and is central to whatever policy document or legal framework we put in place. We haven't been doing well as a nation in terms of following our rules, following our laws, implementing policies. We haven't been too good as a country. We're below average in terms of policy implementation and consistency of policy direction. That's one. Two, we need to now be concerned about the human capacity, meaning the human resources to implement the policy. Who are the policy implementers? Who is in charge of what and how? And it has to be knowledge-based engagement, as we've always advocated. Our sector is strategic and very complex and complicated. Its engineering is complex and complicated. Its accounting is complex and complicated. Its legal and regulatory issues are complex and complicated. Every aspect of the power sector. Its technology is also complex and complicated. Every aspect of the power sector is complex and also complicated. So it's a question of how we are able, as a country, to effectively deploy sound-minded, conscientious Nigerians to implement this fine policy. There's nothing wrong with the policy. The policy is watertight, comprehensive as it were, a globally completed piece of document, and it's got to be implemented just the way the policy is integrated approach in its implementation. And of course, the law is there to back up whoever is implementing. And that's why the challenge lies. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of the power sector. There's a lot of mess in the power sector. We've said this several times. Both the regime of the subsidy, the ATCRC that you mentioned, the regulatory environment at the level of the digital GENCOs and the rest. But this policy document is such that enables us to extricate all those challenges, face them head on in terms of direction. It charts a blueprint, a kind of direction that will if followed, will lead us to the promised land.
All right.
So the question is, who is the driver and which path is it taking us?
I mean, important questions that you have asked there, and hopefully we do get the right answers and we do see that full-on implementation. It has been excellent speaking with you, gentlemen. Professor Yemi Oke, Energy and Electricity Law, University of Lagos, and of course we had Ayo Ekpo, Team Lead at Power Component UK Nigeria Infrastructure Advisory Facility. Thank you, gentlemen.